all set.
Okay, thank you. We'll call the April 2021 meeting of the South Charleston County School Board Audit and Finance Committee to order. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? The agenda is approved. Assuming everyone has had an opportunity to review the minutes, are there any corrections to the minutes? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
That was not an aye opposed, right? Okay. The procurement audit. We will hear from Clifton Allen.
Oh, this is Dawn.
Oh, okay.
I don't see Clifton Larson Allen on the call, so I'm not sure what happened there. I can cover the audit report. Have Wayne Welch on the line if you need to answer questions. And then if Clifton Larson Allen comes on board later, they can weigh in. We essentially haven't gone through the annual audit for the procurement operation. We have 3 audit findings. I'll go through each one of those. The first one, I believe, is a repeat that the district did not.
Way that the screen can move along with the presentation.
I'm having that same problem.
I'm sorry, what's the question, Ms. Coates?
Okay.
What was the question?
So that the
So are
screen.
are we following this on the screen, or do we need to open these documents up on each of our laptops?
So in some instances, it would be better if you would open them up. In this particular instance, we can have it on the screen. So are you able to put those on the screen? Uh-huh. Yeah, there we go. No. Yeah, yes, thank you. So if you go to the next page. To the next page, please. I'm sorry, just what if we were to do this? What if I were to share my screen, would that be more effective? All right. But typically what happens with the Clifton Larson Allen audit report, they will have a PowerPoint presentation that they would go through. So we don't have that PowerPoint up here. So at any rate, there were three findings. One was that the district did not do a review of a representative sample of P-card transactions to make sure that there was compliance. And what we were working on was revamping how we manage the P-card process. We took that to be our review process. The auditors saw it differently. And so we did not do a minimum of 20% of P-card purchases, a compliance review of those each month. And so we have accepted that as well with that finding with no disagreement, and we'll make corrective changes to that process. That's
John, can I ask a question? We knew that there was a 20% requirement, but because we weren't, I mean, is that what you said? I mean, this was something that we weren't aware that we needed to do.
No, we were aware. And so in the past, we have been doing these. And then I decided to do a complete review of the P-card purchase process. And so we're making some changes in that. And so when we went into the pandemic mode last spring, we simply didn't do the sampling that we normally would have done. And so my position during this pandemic was that as we were revamping how we manage the P-card process, that should suffice as the P-card compliance review. The auditors did not see it that way, that we still need to do the 20% each month rather. So yes, we were aware of the requirement and thought we were meeting the requirement through this other process. And again, the auditors saw it differently.
Okay.
And so, and I mean, I didn't take exception to it. I mean, I had a different opinion of my approach, but I didn't take exception to the audit finding. And the second audit finding is similar in terms of I didn't necessarily agree with the citation, but I didn't take exception to it in the audit report. And this again is related to the pandemic. So when the pandemic started and all staff were working from home, we had an instance where that I approved that we need to make a delivery to someone's house versus delivering it to the school, to in this case, Calhoun's, Bridgeview. And so I authorized a direct shipment to an employee's house of a P-card purchase, as opposed to having that person come back into the office during the early stages of the pandemic. So that was an unauthorized delivery. It's one instance of that. And again, I authorized it. And the final finding was simply who's approving a surplus disposition, who has the authority to actually make that approval, the chief procurement officer or the chief business officer, and it was made at a different level of the organization. Again, that's a finding that I did not take exception with. In fact, I didn't take exceptions with any findings. These were the only three.
As it pertains to the surplus, was that a new procedure? I mean, have we been having one person to approve it over the years and we made a change in that?
Let me ask Mr. Wiltshire to talk through that for us, please. Wayne?
That was just a simple mistake on surplus behalf. Normally, the Ron signs off on it. In just this instance, it happened and he didn't sign off on it. But they have procedures in place to ensure going forward that Ron signs off on all of these type of requests.
So this was like a one-time situation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Just like the previous finding, these are one-time instances.
So may I ask a question, Joyce?
Sure.
So I have three questions. So first off, can we go back to the cover page and explain to me what the difference is between, it's the language in the background discussion. It says that expression of an opinion about whether the CCSD procurement procedures are in compliance with the CCSD procurement code and its ensuing regs. And then the last sentence says it does not provide a legal determination on the district's compliance with specified requirements. So what are they providing a determination on? I don't understand why those two things are different. It seems if we get sued under a procurement issue, we're taking this audit to court. So I don't understand why are they different?
Well, Ms. Coates, I don't want to speak for the audit firm, but having been an auditor in my in previous work experience, auditors and audit offices take the position that that management of any part of the operation is the responsibility of management, and so these types of statements are put into audit reports to make that separation between the organization that's being audited, the management of that firm, in this case the school district, and what the responsibilities of the audit firm might be.
So what is the difference between expressed opinion about whether we're in compliance and a legal determination of compliance?
I'll have to get clarification from those statements from the audit firm, and I can email that to the committee.
Thank you. And So I did some review, and I know that at some point, and it was not on a board agenda as an item discussed, it may have been tucked in a cow information, but we did away with the internal audit department. But I hesitate when the solution for any problem is we'll remove the requirement since we eliminated the department that did that. Because auditing 20% of our procurement cards, that's a pretty big deal, particularly with publicity and the ability for those things to go off the rails. And the response on the first finding is we'll remove the requirement. We'll revise the requirements. So that just makes me a little nervous that we find something that we're not doing is in terms of the 20% of P card purchases per month. And the response is, we're going to change that rule. There's a reason that rule was implemented, and I couldn't find from 2020 forward any reason why we decided that rule was not necessary. And I also wanted to know if the firm you hired in 2020 to do the internal audit caught these same issues.
What rule are you talking about, Cindy? I'm sorry. I know what you're talking
I
about.
think I can address this here. If you look at it, we're not per se, what we're doing here is originally this was a function that was being performed by the internal audit department. Mm-hmm. We no longer have an internal audit department. Right. What I'm saying, we're going to change that function from the internal audit department to the internal consulting department, who will now perform that function.
Thank you. That's an excellent explanation. Thank you. So we're removing it from one, but we are immediately adding that job to the consulting.
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. And then, so the last question was, did the audit firm that we hired in 2020, it was on the January 2020 board agenda to hire an external firm to look at our auditing. Did they catch this, or was that not their scope of work? I'd only say that because our P cards are huge expense, and a lot of people have them, and newspapers love to find problems with them.
So
here's the thing that we have to,
any nightmares.
Here's the thing that you have to understand here is the P card administrator does 100% of auditing of P card statements. This is just in addition to what we do.
Thank you. That's perfect. Thank you, Mr. Welcher.
Yes.
Are there any other questions from any of the other committee members? Okay. I want to go back to where, that last audit report where we had no findings. So since these were, one instance, I would assume, I will hope that the next time we will be back to not any findings. But anyways, I'm sorry, Ms. Green, just for clarification, there are two audits that are done each year. One is the fiscal audit, the one that you're referring to with no findings, and then the second one is the procurement audit. So it's two separate audits. Okay, all right, gotcha. Any other questions?
Ms. Green, it is our goal to have no findings.
No findings, yeah. Okay, and I think this was for information and not action. Is that right? I'm having a hard time managing my screen here now.
That is correct.
Yes, ma'am. This was for information.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda is the early learning. Is that right? Because I can't pull my agenda up. Is that the next item?
So
the next item is the Head Start budget.
Pardon?
Yeah. Good afternoon. You're correct, Ms. Green. The next item is the Head Start, early Head Start budget regarding a COLA. Every year, the Office of Head Start allocates funding, or most years allocates funding for us to receive a COLA for the upcoming school year. So we do have to apply for it. So we are requesting the approval to allow us to apply for the COLA funding. it would only be, if approved by the board and approved by the Office of Head Start, it would only be allocated along with district if they do a COLA for the next school year.
Can you repeat the last sentence that you said?
Sure, the COLA is for the next upcoming school year, it's for 2021, 22, not 2021. And so we have to apply for it to the Office of Head Start. And
Right.
we would only implement the COLA if the district implements the COLA for the the rest of the staff.
Okay, got you. Any questions? Can I get a motion to approve the Head Start funding COLA supplement application?
I move to approve.
Second? Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
May I ask a question? Just,
Sure.
and Ms. Foxworth, this can't be answered today, but I think it might, and I would ask the chair, that it seems like we're a little top heavy in this department. I mean, I went through the listing, and there's managers of site managers and then managers of programs within the site managers. And I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation, but there seems to be an awful lot of managers in this program. How many kids does the Head Start, Early Head Start serve?
Head Start, Early Head Start together serves 1,001 students when we are funded. And the Office of Head Start, or the Head Start program, requires a lot of levels of supervision, starting with the teachers, and then the site managers are the ones on site that make sure all the DSS regulations on each site are followed. And then we have others like education managers to make sure that education Head Start performance standards are followed. And then Head Start requires us to have a service area manager for each content area, such as health, mental health, screening, etc. So a lot of these mandates that we have are because of Head Start mandates. The Office of Head Start allows us, we cannot go above 15% administrative fee, and we are not near that. And Avis can tell you what our
Thank you. I may want to ask, because it does look like possibly some overlap. I certainly understand why you need the health and nutrition manager, the nurse, the compliance manager, but then you have 3 other compliance managers managing specific compliances. So just when you put it in one page, it can look like a lot, but I'm sure there are reasonable explanations, and certainly if you're not exceeding the 15%. But maybe we can talk about this offline.
Sure.
Yeah, or maybe it might be that once we see what the requirements are, then we would have some comparison as to those positions that are being required, that the grant requires us to have, and versus those positions that we are trying to, the other positions. Bless you.
Thank you.
If that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? So we had a motion and a second. All in favor of approving this item?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So the item carries, and we'll move to the next item. And I'm totally dependent upon whomever is dealing with the screen to see what's going on. Okay, so the next item is the fixed cost of ownership. Is that Jeff, is that you or Tom?
Yes, Ms. Green, I'll turn it over to Tom Naraki.
I think we can make this easy. We can move to, I'd make a motion to approve. It seemed very well explained.
Yeah, okay. And anybody else had any questions about that particular issue? If
Nope.
not, can I get a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Next issue is Phase 5 construction. I guess, Don, this is you.
I'll kick it off. So the finance department was asked to take a look at 4
Okay, you
additional.
are, I'm having a hard time understanding you. I don't know, is it just me or can y'all hear him well?
the Finance Department.
I cannot hear.
Try again, Don.
Hold on a second. How about now?
Okay. No, that was kind of muffled.
No? Hold on a second. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's a little bit better. Can the other members hear Don? Cindy, can you hear Don?
Yes.
Stephen, can you hear Don?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Everybody can hear? All right, so the Finance Department was asked to take a look at the 4 additional potential projects for the Phase 5 capital project program in terms of funding. So as everyone's aware, the Phase 5 program is currently funded 100% from the.
Hey, Don, I don't know if anybody else is having a problem, but I am. I don't know if maybe you need to, if maybe you were too close to the mic. It just seems muffled to me.
Is it muffled now?
It's better. That's better.
How's this? All right, some days I'm too close to the mic and some days. So let me start over. So the capital Phase 5 capital program that was recently approved by the voters in November is funded currently by 100% by the 1 cent sales tax. Staff was asked to take a look at the potential of funding an additional 4 projects using 8% debt capacity. And so what we've done, we've pulled those 4 projects, taken a look at the total cost, and then asked PFM, our financial advisors, whom is on the call here, David Moore, to take a look at our debt schedule currently and figure out how we would be able to fund this additional $77.5 million. So I'll ask Mr. Barori to talk about the projects themselves, and then ask David Moore to talk about the process that we came up with to determine the funding. I would say up front though on the funding was that for quite some time, the district has had a strategy of eliminating debt by the year 2032. And what you will see in the presentation from Mr. Moore, that there are 2 funding options, both using the 8% capacity. And in both those options, the debt will still be retired by 2032. In one option, the millage would go up slightly, and in the second option, the millage of 28 would remain roughly the same. And so you'll see that from David Moore. And before that, we'll ask Mr. Barori to go through the projects.
Thanks, Don. So the 4 projects that I've listed and recommended here are all in North Charleston. Morningside Middle was recommended and approved by the board during the last board meeting. The remaining 3 projects are relatively small dollar amount with, I think, significant added value. Deer Park Middle School has 20 trailers, classrooms and trailers on their campus, and Cochran has 15. Midland Park has 12. And so beginning to try to relieve that burden of trailers in these schools, I think is significantly important, as important as replacing Morningside Middle. The Deer Park Middle School project is an annex to that facility. It'll provide them a cafeteria, which they do not have at all on that campus. For those of you that remember, we bought this campus 5 years ago from a private school, and it did not have a cafeteria. That's why we don't have one there. In addition, fine arts spaces, so it'll make a significant difference in the operation of that school. Midland Park, a very constrained campus. If we eventually want to get rid of trailers there, we need additional land. And for Cochran, it's a large project, 50 million. But if we're able to phase this with replacing the trailers to start with, it will allow us to add down the road if additional funding is available. So for 12.5 million, We can eliminate the campuses trailers and build an annex that would be part of an eventual new school. I think all 4 of these projects are extremely important. If this moves forward, I would recommend and suggest to the board they include them in wave 2 as part of the motion. Wave 2 will begin in 2022.
Can you progress the screen, please? Thank you.
So I'm showing the projects on this slide.
Okay, I'm sorry, Jeff. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just was trying to.
Yes, ma'am. That's all I had.
Okay, and next I'll ask Mr. Moore to go through the PowerPoint that highlights the funding option.
Sure. And Don, yeah, you can go to page 2. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll move through this pretty quickly. We thought it would be helpful to have some background information just to give you some context for how the district manages its debt, the policies and so forth. Right now, the district has about $500 million of long-term debt standing. That's comprised of general obligation bonds and the installment purchase bonds. Though all of that debt, and I'll point to the chart below in a minute, explain that, but all of that debt is paid off by 2032. So the district has had a really going back 15 or 20 years, target 2032 to be out of long-term debt. So you had the flexibility of the opportunity to meet your regular ongoing capital needs, essentially on a pay-as-you-go basis. The second bullet just highlights that each year we issue, and it varies from year to year, depending on exact needs and ancillary projects, but you issue about $55 million of general obligation bonds for fixed cost of ownership and then other miscellaneous projects. When you look in the chart down at the bottom, the gray bars represent the debt service on the fixed cost of ownership, and the blue bars represent the debt service on everything else. Right now, debt service is about $130 million per year. It does change a little bit from year to year. Increases slightly. Some years it decreases a little depending on how the original bonds were structured. And that requires about 28 mils. And as you know, the debt service budget has been locked in at 28 mils for a number of years. That again, just like getting out of debt by 2032, the 28 mils has been a target that we've worked hard to structure debt around so you don't have millage increases. Again, the two kind of underlying goals for your debt management have been to be out of debt by 2032. And by that, I mean long-term debt. And then to do everything we can to keep around 28 mils. Well, that's not a magic number. We've been able to do that while addressing all the district's capital needs. In that chart, there's two things. The bars represent the total debt service, and the yellow line represents the revenue that gets generated by the 28 mil levy. And there's assumptions for modest growth in assessed values over time and so forth. That's why the yellow line drifts up. And you see there's sometimes the yellow line, the revenue is slightly lower than the debt service. Sometimes it's slightly higher. From year to year, we work with staff to manage the precise general obligation debt service payments to fit within the 28 mils. And so you actually have a little extra revenue certain years, you use that the following year. And that's important as we move into the scenarios. Going on to the next page, Don. Actually, wait, before you go there, sorry. When you look out to 2032, you'll see 28 mils. Yeah, can you back? When you look out to 2032 on this chart, 10 years from now, so very soon, the blue mostly disappears. And that means you'll have the choice to fund more projects, essentially pay as you go, or debt service on other long-term GO bonds if desired. And that's, of course, a board decision. Okay, on to the next page. And we'll go through this real quick. This just summarizes what we just heard from Jeff for a total of $77.5 million in projects. So what we did, going on to the next page, we looked at a bunch of different scenarios and then honed in on 2 scenarios that are highlighted on this page. And I'll walk through the first one quickly. The chart to the right that you see is the same chart from the prior page, except for the red is that we've added shows you the debt service for the $77 million in bonds. One of the things you know pretty quickly is that's a pretty small piece of the total debt service for the district. So it doesn't require a huge increase in the millage levy. It works out to be that the millage levy would peak at about 29.5. And of course, there's assumptions as to the growth rate and assessed values, but we typically use very low, 1 or 2% to be conservative. So the millage levy would peak at about 29.5 mils in 2025. And the debt service is about $9 million per year. If you go down, Don, if you could scroll down, we also went in and created a scenario where we shaped the debt service, we optimized the payments, and when you look at the red bar, you see the bar out in 2032 is larger than the other bars, because if you remember from the prior page, that's when a lot of the existing debt service goes away. And so we put more of the payment, it's kind of making a lump sum payment or paying off your mortgage or however you want to look at it. We put that in 2032. And the reason for that was twofold. One, you have space there. And 2, it aligns with the goal of having all long-term debt paid off by 2032. When we do that, we're able to keep the millage levy much closer to 28 mils. It would go up a little bit between now and then in certain years, but it would not go as high as the 29.5 for the prior scenario. The bottom line is both of these, if the board wants to do these projects, that's a very modest increase in the millage levy. So on the last page, just to wrap up, obviously the board will decide what projects should be accelerated into when. We would continue to refine the structure of the general obligation bonds based on when the money is needed for the projects. If the projects are going to all wrap up in a 12 or 18 month period, you would go get all $77 million at one time. If they were going to be phased out over time, we would probably split it up into pieces. But that's not a decision for today. So we think we can structure, I shouldn't say we think, we know that we can structure it to keep the increase modestly above 28 mils. And then at the time we would issue the bonds, we would refine the structure so that we could minimize that increase to be under the 29.5 mils I referenced on the prior page, and can get it to, most likely can end up to where the ongoing millage levy is under 29 mils. And that's about it. The punchline is just what I said, is to fund those projects. The millage levy, you'd have a modest millage levy increase beginning a year or 2 from now, depending on when you would actually borrow the money.
Okay, what questions do we have? I guess my one question would be to Jeff. The board asked you and Don to look at the funding for Morningside. So is it your plan to go back to the board and say, in conjunction with Morningside, if we're going to do that project, you are recommending that we take on the other 2 projects as well? Is that the plan?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so the action for audit and finance today is to make a recommendation on one of the funding options, and I think staff is recommending option 2. If there aren't any questions from the board members, can I get a motion?
I'll move to approve
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. Jeff and Don, let me just say thank you for having the insight to go beyond what the board asked you since you were having to look at this, because I think this will probably, there'll be some board members that would be really pleased that y'all, took that extra step. So thank you so much for that. The next item is, okay, I can't see my sheet. Okay, thank you. The Audit and Finance Community Volunteer. As we know, we are going to have a vacancy, and we sent out the advertisement to recruit for soliciting applicants for the position. And it's my understanding we had 6 applicants. Copies of each of the resumes were attached to your board docs. Don is recommending Ms. Velma Stamp as the replacement. Are there any questions about any of the resumes, questions about process or any of that?
Nope.
Does anybody have any personal knowledge or dealings with Ms. Stamp?
No.
I have worked with her at MUSC. Any questions about any of the other applicants? Can I get a motion?
I make a motion to approve the appointment of Vella Stamp to the Audit and Finance Committee.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Don, is that typical of about how many applicants we would get for a vacancy from the community? I was pleased that we got 6. For some reason, I didn't know what to expect, but is that kind of normal?
Trina's saying that normally we do not get that many.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. And there were several of them that looked fairly well qualified, so that's good to know. Okay, the next issue is the SWMBE report.
Yes,
And
sir.
Trina and Don, thanks for adding the board goals here. That was a nice touch on the each of the items.
Yes, ma'am. That's a new district standard for conveying to the board.
So Don, you're going to talk about this, or is Wayne?
I'll talk briefly about it and Wayne can answer any questions. So each year we are required to take to the board through the Audit and Finance Committee the SWMBE participation from the prior school year. We did that for fiscal year 20 in October of 2021, this past October. So what we are doing now, because when we presented that to the board in October, that was prior to the election of the new 5 board members. So we resubmitted this as information primarily for the benefit of the new board members. In addition to the fiscal year 20 audit report, we're also putting in the results from the summer work in the maintenance department. And in that department, there was an additional amount that was spent during the summer. That would have been fiscal year 21. Let me bring that up. Okay, so the FY20 report was presented to the board in In October, I think I submitted that to the new board as a board update. So the prior pages on this presentation here before this page, that those pages give the results from last year that have been presented already. What has not been presented prior to today is this page here. And this is the work that took place with the facilities maintenance department in the summer of 2020, which would have been after the close of fiscal year 20. And so you can see the numbers here of the total of $23.2 million that was spent this summer. You can see the breakout between small businesses here. African-American businesses, 53%, women-owned businesses, 40%, for a total SWMBE of 96% of the $23 million that was spent. And then when we present in the fall of this coming year, or this fall of this year, in October, the FY21 results, we will see these numbers again, as well as the numbers associated with the full fiscal year. What questions do you have?
Are there any questions? My only observation as I was reviewing this, I know that we exceeded our goal of 20%, but that we spent a lot of money, and I know we are working on increasing that amount that we spend with the minority firms. But and I'm pleased that we were able to beat 28%. But the question that I had, Don, is the group that is working on, I think they were supposed to get started in March. Are they on schedule?
You mean the external?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have been meeting. I think we had 3 meetings. We didn't meet last week because of spring break, and so I'm not sure what the date is in April, but we will be meeting again this month. In addition to that, we have the RFP active for a disparity study. So between those two activities, the disparity study and some of the recommendations that this ad hoc committee is working on, we will bring something back to the Audit and Finance Committee in terms of what realistic changes could be made.
Okay, and I'm still having some difficulty understanding you, but since I'm trying, but maybe since I'm the only one, I'm not gonna try to ask for anybody to do anything. It may be just, I assume it's just me. Okay, any questions of Don on this issue? Okay, the next item is the 90-day enrollment count. Don, are you doing that one?
Hold on a second, please. Sorry. So while I'm doing this, I think Kathy Milne is on. So Kathy, I'm going to ask you to walk through the numbers here on the 90-day enrollment numbers. Maybe Kathy's not on, so I'll do it. So
I'm here. I'm sorry. I was asking Trina to scroll down to the totals.
okay. All right.
So you can see that we are in line with where we were prior year, 90-day. Or sorry, I can't look at Trina's screen.
That's all right. Let me show. So,
there you go. So we have a difference of like 3.5 students, the variance between 90-day and 45. So we are staying in line where we are, and we're about 700 reduced from prior year.
Yeah. So the takeaway here is that compared to the prior year, fiscal year 20, we are actually down, like Kathy said, around 700 students. But we're staying steady for the entire year after we reach the 45th day. So the 135th day is the last day that we have the counts that we submit to the state, and that becomes then the basis for our final appropriations from the state, the 135th day. And so what we anticipate for this year, as well as fiscal year 22 next budget year, that we will have a decrease in student allocations from the state, appropriations from the state, because of our ADM has average daily membership for students has dropped. What questions do you have?
Any questions? Okay. Thank you. Next agenda item. Transportation Summary Report. Mr. Lynch.
Good afternoon. I'd like to report for February 2021 for student transportation. As of February 28th, 2021, First Student had a total of 437 drivers for 390 routes. Compared to February of 2020, they had, Durham had 339 drivers for 357 routes. So our driver count is still holding steady. Late bus lost instructional time tracking. For the month of February, we were able to attribute 83.7 hours of lost instructional time due to buses being late in February. For February 2020, the report that you're looking at is not correct. I was able to find that there were 812.6 hours that we attributed to lost instructional time in February of 2020. Ridership comparison is 11,000 riders roughly for February 2021 compared to approximately 22,000 February 2020. Top 3 schools affected due to late buses were AC Concord with 20.8 hours, Laurel Hill Primary with 12.6, and North Charleston L with 12.4, with the top 3 reasons being traffic, bus breakdown, and/or substitute driver. There was a total of 21 entries in the late bus log for which this report was based on. And again, overall, for the month of February, First Student maintained approximately 112% driver count for the month of February. And that is all I have for transportation. Any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Lynch? Thank you.
Thank you.
Capital projects report, Joyce. Ms.
Yes, good afternoon.
I'm sorry.
No, that Joyce is fine. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to present the February capital projects report. I'm happy to report that our revenue collections for the 2017-2022 program in January were 1.5 million above our 2% cash flow projection. The expenditures for the program were 9.4 million. The expenditures for the 2010 through 2016 capital program were 11,000. Capital maintenance, 8% funding, had expenditures of $218,000. The fixed cost of ownership 21 program is in the final months of completion, and the fixed cost of ownership 22 program has commenced. Happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Thank you, Ms. Costello. Any questions from committee members? You did such a good job. No questions. We'll see you next month. Okay, so the next item is the monthly financial update. Are you doing that, Don?
I am. Okay, so on the slide here is the monthly financial update. Let me see if I can. I'm unable to show the very left-hand side of this, but I can talk through it. So let me walk through the structure of the document first. So the first, the top section here is revenue. So we'll have revenue at the top, and then at the bottom, expenditure. Each column I'll walk through quickly. The first column shows the actual revenue and actual expenditures through February. So that'll be for the first 8 months of the year. And then we estimate, staff estimates in the second column, how much revenue and how much expenditures we will incur for the remainder of the year. We add the first two columns together and come up with an estimated year-end value for revenue and an estimated year-end value for expenditures. And then we compare both of the next column, fourth column, we compare the estimated year-end to the board approved budget for fiscal year 21. And so that is the next column. We have the budget in, and then the variance column, the first variance column, takes a look and compares again the approved budget to the estimated amounts at the year end, and we have the variance shown there. And then for information purposes, we show in the next to the last column what our estimates were for the last month that we reported. So when we reported in March, what did we report to the Audit and Finance Committee? And then we show a final variance column showing the variance between what we're estimating this month and what we estimated last month, so that we can highlight any significant changes in our projection from the prior month. So, and then at the bottom, we have footnotes to highlight some of the activities up top. So that's the structure of the document. So let me walk through the numbers. So actual revenue for through February is $458 million. We estimate that we will receive another $111.4 million between now and the end of this fiscal year. And so the estimated amount of revenue is $569.6 million. That's compared to a budget amount of revenue of $541.4 million. So we are estimating that at the year end June that we will have $28.2 million more in revenue than we budgeted for in the spring of last year. The two biggest factors that's driving the additional revenue, the first line here, $9.1 million additional local revenue. This is revenue through ad valorem taxes. So what happens here, we build a budget based on assessed property values that have been assessed by the county auditor. They do that in the winter of each year, and then we build our budget on that. In the fall of each year, the county auditor does another analysis and updates the assessments. This year, we did not make any adjustments to our revenue projections at the end of in September when those analyses were done by the county auditor's office. In February of this year, the county auditors did an additional, which is typical, an additional analysis on assessed property values. The assessed property values were significantly higher in February of this year than what they were last year when we built the budget. And so that $9 billion increase in revenue is driven largely by increased assessed property values for local revenue. Questions on revenue? I'm sorry, on local revenue. On the state revenue, we have $17.6 million that we're projecting more in revenue. And for committee members that were on the committee last spring when we went into the pandemic, and the state never adopted a budget, we took a very conservative approach in estimating the state revenue. When the federal government released the first round of CARES funding back in late spring of last year, they did so with the stipulation to the state departments of education that they would receive the money that they could not allocate to their school districts less than the average of the last 3 years, the prior 3 years of appropriations. So we took that number, this $185 million here was the average of the appropriation for the prior 3 years. And that's what we budgeted. And then when the the state finally decided what the appropriations were going to be, they decided that for fiscal year 21, the 21 appropriations would essentially be the exact same amount that they were for fiscal year 20. And so we did not budget for that additional amount. So the $17.6 million complies primarily of that additional amount that we did not budget because of the conservative nature of our budgeting and with the uncertainty associated with the pandemic. So those are the two biggest factors that are driving the revenue to be $28 million higher than projected. On the expenditure side, I think this is the first time since I've been here that we've shown a projections that we're going to end the year. This first line here, salaries, that we're showing that we're going to actually overspend on salaries for this fiscal year. And the reason that is because we have two expenditures in salaries that were not budgeted. One was the bonus that was allocated out to staff last fall. And then the second one was the salary adjustments, the COLA and staff increases that were approved by the board this early this spring or late winter. So we have those two components were not in the budget, and hence the additional salary amounts showing that we've been over budget. The other thing that I would highlight here is that there's a significant under budget projection on purchase services of $8.5 million. And that's being driven again by the pandemic. We spent less in purchase services because of the pandemic than what we had budgeted. We totaled all of this $13.4 million. I'm sorry, this is the CARES Act that we received late last spring. That has been moved into the appropriate revenue lines where those expenditures have been made or are being made, and that's highlighted in the footnotes at the bottom here where those are going. So we add up all the variances for the expenditures. We're projecting that we're going to be over budget about $3.9 million here. And then when you add those two figures up, the over budget amount of expenditures of 3.9 and the additional revenue of $28 million, we're projecting that we will have a excess revenue over expenditures of $24.7 million here. So what would happen with that 24.7 at this, the point that this estimate is now, this estimate will change each month as we get to the end of the fiscal year. But this should be the ballpark figure where we would expect to end the year. So currently in the fund balance that we have budgeted for fiscal year 21 is $112 million. At this point, when we close the books, this $24.3 million would be added to the fund balance. So our fund balance then would increase to $136, $137 million. We had budgeted to use fund balance to help manage this budget because of additional revenue. We will not use all of that, and we will be able to, in fact, as I indicated, increase fund balance. And as the committee will recall, earlier this fiscal year, actually last fiscal year, we approved, you all approved a change to the fund balance that allows but the district to place 16% of its prior year expenditures into committed fund balance as an emergency fund. So that's essentially around $84 million. So that's the monthly financial report. It's slightly better than last month because of the state revenue projections that we did not have until recent. What questions do you have?
Any questions for Don? Can y'all still hear me? Hello, can anybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm
Okay.
good.
Something's going on with my computer because I can't even now see the documents. So anyways, are there any questions for Don? Okay, if not, thank you, Don. And we'll move on to the next item. Um, 2022 budget.
So this is and the multi-year financial plan. And we use this as the starting point for developing the budget. This is the first month for this fiscal year that we have, we are presenting the multi-financial plan. So we'll show where we are. I'll bring it up in a second, but we will show where we are for fiscal year 21, sorry, I just showed you. And then what our projections are currently for fiscal year 22, and then how that plays out with fiscal years 23 and 24. Again, that would be the starting point for developing the fiscal year 22 budget. And then in addition to the multi-year forecast for the general operating fund, the committee has asked staff to also do something similar for the capital fund to show a multi-year forecast. And so we have that as a presentation also. Right. So it might get a little tricky seeing these numbers. So if you have the document in front of you, it may be helpful. Again, let me walk through the structure of the document. And this is a summary document that is comprised of a lot of detailed Excel spreadsheet, but we'll summarize this here. Again, at the top half of the document, we show revenues. At the bottom half here, we show expenditures. The first four columns here in white, we have a historical picture looking at actuals for fiscal year 17, 18, 19, and 20. That's here in the first section of numbers. In the blue section here, we look at those actuals from 17 to 20, and we put averages in here. The averages that I'm focused on primarily are the average annual change, percentage change from 17 to 20. That becomes then, those averages then become the basis for the staff to think about how we use those percentages to do projections for the out years. So for instance, in the local revenue here, in the blue column here, the average amount is $306.4 million per year. The average change has an increase of 24.1 million for an average of 7.87% each year increase in local revenue. So that's the same for all of the revenue sources here, as well as the expenditure. It's looking at a historical perspective, using that historical data to help inform how we plan on projecting, forecasting what the future might look like. The next column to the right of the blue, the first column to the right of the blue, this says FY21 budget. So that's simply the budget for this fiscal year. The next column here, this orange column, is the exact set of figures that I just went over in the monthly financial, the projected year end, showing the $569.6 million of revenue, the expenditures here, and then down here at the bottom, the $24.3 million of excess revenue over expenditures. So this is these two columns here, the projected year end and the variance column, is what I just showed the committee on the monthly financial report. And then this then becomes, this column here, the projected year end, then becomes the basis for projection of where we will have the fiscal year 22 budget. So the first one here is FY, and then the column here says projected FY22. This is our first look at what the revenues would be for 22, as well as the expenditures might be for 22. So let me walk through some of those numbers. So here, the first one, we're saying that we would receive $364.2 million in local revenues, $364 million. That is a 5.35% increase over fiscal year 21. So you can see back over here in the blue column that the average for the last 4 fiscal years has been a 7.87% increase in local revenue each year. And so we reduced that to 5.35% as our projection. And we do that by using the assessed property values, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. So $364 million for local revenue, The next big number here is the $207.8 million that is state revenue for fiscal year 22. Again, coming back over to the blue column here, this 5.07%. That's been the average increase in state revenue. We put in almost 2.5%. And the reason why we did not go higher than that is because, as you recall from the presentation that Captain Milne did on the 90-day enrollment, that we have a reduction in enrollment, a reduction. So that means fewer students, less money coming in from the state in their EFA, Education Finance Act appropriations. Also, I'm gonna skip down and talk a little bit more about state revenue and why we're not accelerating that more than what we have. So I mentioned this number right here, 46,283. This is the ADM for the number of students as of 90 days. And you can see from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 21, we have that reduction. So that means, again, fewer students. And then the other thing I want to highlight in this table, in this column here, this is the base student, what's called the base student cost. And so this is a state number that's allocated. This is a dollar amount that's allocated by the state to every student, every K-12 student in the state. So you'll hear the state talk about the base student cost is going up. So for the current fiscal year, it's $2,489. It's going to go up to $2,500 next year. And so one would think that with the base student costs going up, then Charleston would be getting more money this next year compared to this year because of the increase in the base student costs. But in fact, we do not. We do not get the full $2,500 help. We get an amount that's calculated based on what's something called the index of taxpaying ability. And what that is that the state education funding formula through EFA looks at the property values of each county in the state and gives each county an index. And that index is based on what supposedly is the county's ability to fund a portion of its education. And so the base student cost amount, the $2,500, is adjusted based on the county's ability to absorb some of that cost. And so how that plays out for Charleston here, out of that $2,500, next year, we would receive $812 per student. So we would not get $2,500 per student, but we would get $812. You can see for the current year, we're getting $833 per student. So we're getting less money next year. We'll get less money next year per student than we're getting this year, although the base student cost increased. And the reason why that is because the change in our index. Our index has gone up from 140,570 to 0.14270. And what that index indicates is that our property values here in Charleston County have increased at a higher rate than the property values elsewhere in the county. And so the way the formula works, the richer you are, the richer a county is in terms of property values, the state assumes that you have the ability to pay a bigger share of your education, educating the children. And then for a poor county, poor in terms of property value, the state will pick up a bigger share of that. So where you see where Charleston is getting 32% of the $2,500 base student cost, a very poor county may very well be getting 90% of that base student cost. So it's prorated out based on property value. The irony here is that although our index is going up because our property values are going up, we are prohibited, anyone in the state is prohibited in the school district, is prohibited from using homeowner property values for the general operating fund. So although our property values are going up, we cannot tap that to actually make up for this shortage, this reduction in the base student cost. And that's a result of Act 388 that was enacted by the state legislature back in, I think, 2008 or so. So I was going back here, then our revenues, one would think that they would go up from the state based on the increase in the state in the base student cost, but because of how the legislative laws are structured, that is not the case for Charleston. So those are the primary, and so the last item on the projected revenues I'll talk about is $20.7 million. It is called transfers, solar transfers, and that is the majority of that comes from the state through the EIA, Education Improvement Act, and then a portion of that $20.7 million comes in from indirect rates that apply to grants that we get from the federal government. And so for a total projected revenue next year of $590 million. And then on the expenditures, the ones that would highlight primarily are the changes in salaries. So we expect salaries to, at this point, to be $288.6 million, or increase of 1.87%. And when you compare the average increase over the last 4 years, that number is 6.15%. But you can see we dropped significantly below that 6.15%. And the reason why, again, is because we have the bonus in there this year that was not budgeted, and as well as the information associated with the unbudgeted salary adjustments that we made this year. And at this point, I'm not going to go through all the other expenditure lines here. Again, we use this as the basis to begin the development of the budget. And so when we come to the Audit and Finance Committee next month, you'll have more details. Now, I will say here that of the $608 million of expenditures that's projected as a starting point, that does not include any changes, primarily increases that the various divisions would need to make sure that they are able to continue making the progress that they're making. This $10 million here, $10,893,000, is a number that's called a use of fund balance that can be used to cover any potential increases for next year. I expect that number to be insufficient for a starting point of developing the budget, but however, it is an amount of almost $11 million as a starting point that would allow us to begin to talk about increases for next year. The last two pieces I'll talk about on the projections for next year is this $2.7 million, and that is called use of fund balance mission critical action carry forward. So the current fiscal year, the budget includes, I think it's about $12.4 million of mission critical expenditures. Out of that $12.4 million, we are projecting that we will not use $2.7 million of it. And so we would carry that forward to next year's budget. And then the $12 million here, this is use of fund balance. Every year since I've been here, we've been using the portion of the fund balance to help balance the budget. And at the same time, we've been able to add to the budget, to the fund balance at the end of the year. Now, this projection here of this $12.3 million, and so for the committee to understand here on the local revenue, the way we project, we have to be in agreement. We, the staff, the finance staff, has to be in agreement with the county auditor's office. We meet with them throughout the year. So in the fall of each year, the late summer rather of each year, I have to sign a document. So it's almost like a certification document, agreeing with the county auditor that this is the amount of local revenue that they're going to issue millage on. and how much they're going to raise for the district. They use their numbers based on assessed property values, and so what we generally agree with the two entities, the county auditors and the school district, that for the last 50 years we've been using 3%, a 3% increase in assessed property value to generate the local revenue. So that's for planning purposes. When we take a look at the historical going back several years, the actual increase in assessed property values has been closer to 8%. And so that's one of the reasons that we've generated a lot more revenue in the local taxes than what's been budgeted. Because of the assessed property value estimates have come in significantly higher than what we put into the budget. Again, I am locked into making sure that I'm in agreement with the county auditor. They take a conservative approach on this, which I understand. And so at any rate, I know at the same time, based on history, at least for the last several years, that the amount of local revenues are coming in significantly higher than what we have budgeted. And so what we've done here with this $10.9 million, although the $364 million here is based on the assessed property values increasing at 3%. We've done a calculation to say, what if they were to increase to a level of 5%? And so that's what this number here, this $10.89 million is based on, is increasing assessed property values closer to what the actuals have been for the last several years. And the proposal that I'm presenting is that we not to use that to say we can have additional local revenue, but say that we would take that amount of money, in this case, the 12.3, from the fund balance to help balance the fiscal year 22 budget with a plan to replace that use of fund balance with this $10.9 million, assuming that the assessed property values come in higher than what they historically do in terms of what we budget. So that's a little bit complicated explanation. So I'll pause here, make sure that there's any questions for understanding, especially on how I'm treating the proposing to treat the local revenue.
Any questions for Don? Okay. Thank you, Don.
So that not quite finished. So that's the fiscal year 22, and then that becomes the basis for projecting where we think we're going to be on in fiscal year 23 and 24, and we have certain factors that we use for each of these line items to do the projections. And I would note here at the bottom for fiscal years 23 and 24, we're showing positive numbers right now. I expect those numbers to actually go down because, as I indicated here, and for fiscal year 22, we have $10.9 million here of that we have as a placeholder for additional expenditures that we have not carried out into 23 and 24. And once we get the updates from the various divisions in the district on terms of additional expenditures for next year, then we would carry those out, make adjustments here, and then plan on how we would what the impact would be to fund balance, ensuring that we always be in a position to maintain our level of fund balance as required by the fund balance policy. So now I'm finished on the multi-year projection. What questions do you have?
So one thing I think might be helpful going forward, particularly as we start talking about the ensuing years, is we're spending about $31 million a year more every year. These are expenditures, not revenue. And it might be help, and we're stagnant on the number of students. So we're not serving more students. It might help if we knew what portion of that 31 million was COLA, STEP, and fixed cost increases. and if COLA instead for existing employees. And I think that should be a relatively easy number to grasp. Because we've increased, from 2017's budget until what you're proposing for next year is $185 million increase in expenditures. And I think for us to be able to calibrate that, we know there's a lot of new people that have been hired since 2017. We know there's a lot of programs that have been bought since 2017. We get that, but let's collate it back down. How much of that was mandatory COLA and STEP for existing employees and fixed cost of operations increases that were out of our control. And then we can talk about what's left as the increase.
So, okay, that makes sense.
Any additional comments or questions?
So this is Jarita. I just wanted to thank Don and the finance staff. They're among those groups of people who do incredible work. People know when they don't do their work, but they rarely get the kind of appreciation that that this committee can give them. So I just wanted to give a shout out to them for the just amazing job that they do and making it look so easy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Postwick, and I totally agree with you. Hats off to you, Don and staff.
Thanks to my staff. Well, thank you all. Thank you. All right. So speaking of staff, the next item, I'm sorry, are there any other questions on the multi-year forecast for the general operating fund? Okay, so I'm going to ask Joyce Green to, sorry, Ms. Green, Joyce Costello.
I was wondering, I said, Don's thinking he's still on vacation.
We have one too many Joyces on the call, I guess. Again, good.
One second, Joyce. So I'm going to ask her to go through the multi-year section for the capital, and this is the first time we have done this. Mr. Brett Johnson, he's asked for about, I think he started about maybe a year and a half ago, said that when we bring to the committee the multi-year general operating fund forecast, he would like to see the same thing for the capital. And so Joyce has worked extremely hard on this to put together the projections for the capital. And I'm going to ask her to walk through that for you all. Joyce.
Oh, thank you, Don. And again, I'm very excited to present the first edition of the Capital Fund's multi-year forecast. The document is comprised of 6 pages. The first page consists of a summary page with revenues and expenditures. Page 2 is the revenue detail, and page 3 through 6 are the expenditure details. You could just leave it on summary page. All pages include footnotes with assumptions that are being made to support the numbers. And to reiterate, this is a capital funds multi-year program. Therefore, unlike the general operating, capital programs cross over from one fiscal year to the next. Some programs, like the sales tax program, for instance, commence at the beginning of a calendar year instead of a fiscal year. So those considerations have been modeled into the fiscal year numbers being presented today. So on the summary page, page 1, on the left-hand side, you'll see all of our revenue sources, and below are all the expenditures for the programs. The first column are the actuals for 2020, which are based on our audited financials. The next column over is our budget for 2021. And the third column is the projected column, which probably has the most significance at this point, because this is our best projection as of this time. So if we go down column 3 for the projections, the first item for revenues is our fund balance. And we've increased that slightly from the budget number because of our 2020 numbers. Less expenditures were spent in 20, so we have some funds carrying forward there. The next line item is fixed cost of ownership. That is a 1-for-1. We just borrow the amount that we need for the fixed cost of ownership program, so that is finite. The second thing applies to the 8% capital maintenance program of 10 million. There won't be any change there either. The next line item is bridge funding for the 2017-2022 program. You'll see in the projected column, there's a negative 30 million. And to explain that is the bridge funding is funding we borrow with 8% bonds so that we can make sure we meet all of our obligations of the program, because we receive the sales tax revenues from the state on a monthly basis. So it really is exactly what it says. It's a bridge. It's a bridge to help us get over those points where we might not have received the revenue from the state. So we have borrowed a total of 163 million for this program. Well, now it's time to start paying that back, which is done via the sales tax revenues. So PFM, David Moore, who you saw earlier, advised us that we can safely pay down 30 million of that 163 million in this year, which will be paid actually next month in May. The following line item is our revenue projections for the sales tax program are going up slightly, again, based on PFM's model that they do, an update based on our actual revenues that we are receiving. I basically work with them on a monthly basis, and at least on a quarterly basis, we update these revenue numbers. We want to go down to expenditures. Phase 3, which is the 2010 through 2016 building program. You'll see a difference in the budget versus projection because we just have a few lingering projects in that. The main one being the D3 bus lot project, which everyone knows is on hold or just taking a little bit of time. So a year ago, we thought we would have expended more, but the reality is we're probably looking at about $10,000 for the rest of this year. The next expenditures are for the phase 4 program. This revised number in the projection column of 156.9 million is based on the fourth quarter ending 12/31/20, projections from our construction management firm coming. That's where those numbers are provided from. Farther down is the 8% capital maintenance. Again, it's a finite number. We borrowed 10 million, we have 10 million to spend. The same for the fixed cost of ownership, which is 47 million in 21. So the fourth column over is basically the variance. I'm comparing the 21 budget to the 21 projection. So that's how those roll up based on the information I've given on why those numbers are changing. So at the end of our projected numbers, at the very midway of that page, we're projecting our revenues to exceed our expenditures at the end of fiscal year 21 to a positive $26 million. So that positive number will come up. The fiscal year 22 was highlighted in yellow, but I see it's not on the screen. That's our beginning number for fiscal year 22. Again, if we go down, the $49.2 million is actually a finite number, which the board had approved in February to fund and for the funding and the program of fixed cost ownership 22. The same applies to the 10 million right below it for the 8% capital maintenance. That's already been board approved. The next number is bridge funding for phase 4. Again, a negative number because we are paying down the amount that we had borrowed for the program. And again, it's being paid from the sales tax collections. Below that is our projection for revenues for phase 4 based on PFM's model generated revenues that they provide to us based on current and future activities. The next item is bridge funding for the 2023-2028 program phase 5. Again, the board has already approved this $15 million for this program, which we'll receive in May to get that program jump-started before it actually commences. The expenditures are pretty self-explanatory below. Again, the phase 4 expenditures are coming from quarterly cost curves from Cumming, our construction management firm. The phase 5, the 8% capital maintenance and the fixed cost, again, are fixed numbers based on the amount we've borrowed. We can move over to projected 2023. What we're projecting, I'm going to go to the second line item for fixed cost of ownership. We are projecting a 4% increase from the prior year for fixed cost of ownership, actually in fiscal year 23 and 24. The next line item is 8% capital maintenance. We will be phasing that out in fiscal year 23 because the phase 5 program will be commencing. Capital maintenance is going to be receiving 35% of the total revenues for that program. They're going from phase 4 program, which was a total of $108 million, to a total of $270 million in phase 5. The next item is the bridge funding for phase 4. This will be our final payment for the bridge funding. Then we have the sales tax phase 4. This program will be wrapping up in 23. The sales tax are collected through December 31st, 22, but there's a lag in when we actually receive the revenues from the state. So that'll carry a little into fiscal year 23. Next is bridge funding. Again, for phase 5, this is an estimate of $35,000 in fiscal year 23 and then $50 million in fiscal year 24, based on what we think we have the capacity to borrow and also needs that we may have. Some of those needs, we haven't created cost curves for phase 5 yet. So these are based on the capacity to borrow and prior history of what we can execute in certain years. The next line item is the 1 cent sales tax phase 5 revenues. Again, in fiscal year 23 and 24, these are provided by PFM, who continues to upload and update their models and provide those numbers. The expenditures, sales tax phase 3, we are looking positively to wrap that up in fiscal year 23 with the D3 bus lot and any other miscellaneous projects that we may have in the final stages. Phase 4 expenditures, again, these are based on the fourth quarter cost curves. We should be wrapping up that program in fiscal year 23. And right when we end one sales tax program, the other one rolls right into it, as you know. So we are projecting $82 million and $161 million, respectively, of expenditures in phase 5 for fiscal year 23 and 24. And again, to note, this is based on estimates and historical information, and also what revenues we will have available to execute. Because the cost curves haven't been done, these numbers could fluctuate, just to let you know. And I think I just have the fixed cost of ownership expenditures left for fiscal year 23 and 24. The assumption is the 4% increase, exactly like the revenue, and that's a fixed number. So the bottom line is for fixed projected fiscal year 22, fiscal year 23 and 24, we are currently projecting a positive ending balance of revenues exceeding our expenditures. I know that was really fast and a lot of information to take in and a lot of assumptions. I'm happy to answer any questions or clarify anything you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate your explanations. All right, so Don, are we still working on the budget? Is this I'm not, I can't see anything on my screen again, so I don't know where we are.
So that concludes the presentation. Again, the multi-year financial projections and the general operating fund, that's the basis for the beginning of the fiscal year 2022 budget. So I need to make sure that the committee understood that fiscal year 22 projection, and then we will build the budget from there. And when we come back to the Audit and Finance Committee in April, then we will have that level of detail for the fiscal year 22 budget. And there's a board workshop that's coming Monday. We'll talk about the fiscal year 22 budget and what some of the additional expenditures that are being considered.
Is that workshop the workshop you've done previously for board members, or this is requested from the new board members?
So typically each year there's at least one board workshop, and so this would be following the formats that we've used in the past.
Okay. Any other questions for Don or Jeff or anyone else regarding any of the agenda items, because that's the last agenda item before we go into executive session? So if there are no more questions or comments, I will entertain a motion that we go into executive session.
Make a motion that we go into executive session.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Committee members, I guess we will stay. Are we going to be asked to join something, Trina, or do we just stay put? Okay, Maggie, I'm sorry. I see now. Okay, so we were in executive session to receive information. No votes were taken, no decisions made. With that, I will entertain a motion that we, I'm sorry, Don, we need to deal with the items for the board meeting. And I don't have my agenda right in front of me because I've been having problems all day. So let's see here.
I think there are just four: the Head Start COLA, the fixed cost of ownership, the Phase 5 construction, and the Audit and Finance Community Volunteer.
Okay. Okay, I'm just getting this. So as long as Trina has that. Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second? Are you out there, Cindy? Is anybody else here except you and I, Stephen? Is everybody gone?
I see other people are still on.
Second.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. We're just trying to entertain a second, get a second to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I'm having internet issues.
Oh, okay, okay. All right, thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you at the May meeting. Thanks for your participation.